Can you break the law at work? Maybe if you are, part of a mafia and people come to work to break the law, maybe you don't want to put that in your policy.
All right, so today we get to talk about something super exciting. I mean, this is mind-blowing. Like, just get ready.
Yeah,
Put your seatbelts on.
Explosive stuff.
Yeah, we're about to talk about policies. Yep, policies.
Written policies.
Written policies. Pretty much the most exciting thing you can think of. But we're going to make it even more exciting. So, Travis, policies. And as a start to this video, as a precursor, let's just say this is super important, obviously.
Very.
And we'll get into the reasons why. Actually, let's jump into the reasons why right now. Why is this an important topic to talk about, Travis?
Right. So everybody should have written policies in their business to help them manage or make decisions with regards to how their information technology is set up. But there's a couple fundamental reasons why it's important. One, if you want to be a good employer and you want to be able to hold your employees accountable to standards that you have, you should probably write those standards down. You should probably tell your employees what those standards are. That's just being a good employer. It's not fair to expect people to perform a certain way, but not to give them that expectation in the first place, right? So write down how it is you want them to use these technologies and how you want them to perform with regards to these different areas. And then it's okay to hold them accountable to it. The second thing is liability. Would you like to remove some liability from yourself and push it potentially onto the other, people in your organization if they don't follow the policy? I would, because if I say, hey, I want you to do things this way, and then you don't do that, as a business owner, I've taken the steps necessary to not be negligent here, right? I've said this is how this should be done. If you went against that, that's on you. Right. And so as a business owner, you need to write down what it is you want your people. They're representing you. These folks are out in the world representing you in your business. And the last thing you want them to say is, well, I thought this was okay. I thought we could behave this way or do these things with these devices. And then it's on you and you've got that liability. But the third thing is, if you want to run a good business, you want to be well organized, you need to write it down, right? You need to, going through the exercise of trying to answer some of these questions and create these policies is just going to make you a better business, because you're going to start thinking about stuff that you haven't taken the time to think about before. And you're going to be better prepared for certain problems that might arise when they arise, because you went through this exercise. You've said to yourself, actually, I do know what to do here. I do know how we want to address this problem because we thought about it ahead of time. So that's why, right? Make you a better employer, reduce liability, and then just make you a better business overall.
Yeah, it's like, if you invite somebody to play basketball, they never heard of it before. Say they're from, some other country where they don't have basketball.
Antarctica.
You invite them to come play. Antarctica.
Yeah.
They're from Antarctica.
Yeah.
And they're not aware of basketball. You invite them to play and you hand them the ball, and they start, kicking it, double dribbling, they're stealing from somebody by using a stick and hitting them in the shin.
Right.
Is it really their fault?
No, they don't know what the game is. So yeah, you've got to tell them what the game is.
Yeah. So all right, now we've established why this is so important for businesses to do. Let's talk about them. Let's talk about these policies. What are 5 of the most important policies?
Okay, great. So I did write down 5, and I do have a couple extra bonus ones as well. So you're not limited to these 5. But the first one is an acceptable use policy governing the way you handle the internet. Okay, what is acceptable to do on the internet at work? I wrote down some examples here. Like, you want to define what acceptable and unacceptable behavior is. For instance, the creation, transmission of offensive, obscene, or indecent documents or images. Probably that's the kind of wording you want to have in there, that's not okay. That's unacceptable behavior. How do you feel about things like torrenting at work, sending spam to people? Hacking, crime. Is it okay? Can you break the law at work? Maybe if you are, part of a mafia and people come to work to break the law, maybe you don't want to put that in your policy. But for the rest of us, I think breaking the law on the internet, probably that's something that's unacceptable. What about customers' internet? Do your people go to other people's business and use their internet at all? Maybe you should outline some stuff there too. How do you want them to behave when they're on a customer's network? Same set of rules, probably, right? Or better. So just define an acceptable use, what is okay and what's not okay. There's a lot of examples online. I think we're also going to probably do a blog article about this that might go into a little bit more detail. But really, this is, all of these are things that you should, if you have a technology partner, you should talk to them about too, because they can help you through a lot of this. They'll probably even have templates if they're good. Password policy. What is your password policy in your business? Are you allowed to share your passwords with other people in the organization? There's been a lot of crimes, or they didn't know they were crimes. There's been court cases where people have shared their password with others, and then it turns out that was something they shouldn't have done. So do you have a policy about that in your organization? How do you want passwords constructed? How strong do they need to be? When do they need to be rotated? Is it when somebody is let go in your organization? If you have any shared passwords that are known between multiple people, do you rotate them when someone's let go or leaves? Or have you had the same password shared amongst every single person in your company for the last 20 years? And that person that worked for you 20 years ago can come back and get on your systems and use it. Think this stuff through, create a policy, and then you can use your technology to implement it. Mobile device policies. Lots of people are using phones, tablets, laptops. How do you want those used? You can cover basic stuff like it's not okay to keep your laptop in your car overnight. You should probably write that down, because people's cars get broken into and things get stolen. So you want to think about, how are we protecting ourselves against things like theft? Do we want people connecting to public Wi-Fi, or do we want to require a VPN? Can they bring their own device to work? Are you allowed to bring your own phone to work and get on the corporate network with it? Now, granted, you can put controls in place to prevent that, but if you don't have those controls, you at least want to have something written down that says, "Hey, please don't do that." And again, back to the laptops. If you've got a laptop, who's allowed to use it? And we'll get into another type of policy later that goes into more detail on that. Email policy. When can you send information in email outside of your organization? So when is it okay to put, or what kind of information is it okay to share externally? And what kind of information is it not okay to share externally? What is okay to do in email? Again, this comes back to I'm not going to harass people in email. Let me see. Personal identifiable information. There's an acronym for this. Maybe it's on the bottom of the screen when I say this. PII. Personally identifiable information. Driver's license numbers, social security numbers. Do you have a policy that says, hey, you can't send these things in email? You should, right? What about payment information? Can you send credit card numbers, customer data? What if you're in healthcare? Patient data? You got HIPAA regulations. Vendor, supplier information. Do you want that being transmitted outside your organization? The fifth one, data protection, retention, and destruction policies. How are you protecting your data? Do you require encryption? Where do you require it? Do you require passwords and MFA on this stuff? How long are you keeping emails for and keeping data for? Do we have to keep all this stuff for 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, forever? Do we actually want to get rid of it at a certain point because of the nature of our company and our business? We don't want emails going back past a certain time frame for liability purposes. We don't, some organizations don't want to hang on to that data. So what is the policy? How do you destroy that data? What's the way that you want to go about destroying it? If you're getting rid of a computer, do you need to get a certificate of destruction from a recycler for that hard drive? And again, all this comes back to those first three things we talked about. But I guess there's a fourth thing, which is, do you have any sort of regulation, that's imposed upon your organization? Because that regulation, I promise you, requires these kinds of policies. So there's my top 5: AUP, password, mobile device, email, data protection, retention, destruction. Everybody should go through that exercise and think of those things.
That's a mouthful there, but clearly everything you mentioned is actually it's actually logical if you sit down and think about it. Makes sense. There, as you mentioned, I know there's a few more, and before I jump into the next question, maybe we can cover those real quick. What are the additional ones that you said these bonus policies that
Sure.
businesses can implement?
Okay, so you do need to have a written policy about your backups, um, at least between you and your information technology team, whoever that is. Maybe they have one written internally. You should get a copy, or at least ask what that is, what the standards are. But what are you backing up? How often do you back them up? Where are the backups kept? Are the backups kept with encryption? These kinds of, like, what is the policy, right? It's really important to have that written down, and then of course to implement it as written, right? So to make sure that you have the technology and the means to implement it as written, and then to be able to check it, right? Say, here's what we're supposed to be doing. Are we in fact doing that? Because of COVID and the way the world's changed in the last couple of years, a work from home policy do you have, which can go into your mobile device? Maybe it's related, maybe it's a subsection of that, maybe it's standalone. But if you're working from home, is it okay if your kids get on your laptop, your work equipment, and play Roblox? Is that okay? Probably not. You probably don't want them doing that. So again, you want these kinds of things written down. If you're going to work from home, here's what is okay and isn't okay on company equipment.
I'd imagine there's other policies as well that could even potentially get into a little bit of controversy. What are you allowed to wear at work? What kind of hairstyle should you have at work? How can you have a mustache? How long can your mustache be at work?
You got to figure this stuff out. But that's going to be part of your handbook, right? And so you're bringing up a great point. You're already doing that with your HR team as part of your handbook. This should be in your handbook too. Your acceptable use policy should be in your handbook. So your employees have to read it, have to initial it, to sign off on it. Like, all this should be there. The backups one doesn't need to be in your handbook. And so I think this is a good opportunity to make some sort of distinction here, right? Some of these policies need to be written down and handed to your employees and put in the handbook. Some of these don't need to be, but they still should be written down and then talked about with your IT department or your MSP or however you're handling your information technology. And then you should go through those together to make sure that technically they're being enforced. And the other part of this is, even the ones that you give to your employees, there are ways to enforce them through technology, which takes a lot of the burden off the user, which is, my preferred way of doing things. It's one thing to say, hey, we don't want you to go to these kinds, excuse me, had some burp in there. It's one thing to say to an employee, hey, we don't want you going to these types of websites at work. But isn't it better to actually implement technology to prevent that in the first place? Like, it's better to put up safeguards for people than just to have to rely on them to always do the right thing all the time or not make mistakes. So, talk with your technology provider and they can help you implement these technically, up to a certain point.
If you're a policy scroller and you just scroll through, get to the I agree and click on it, then, when it comes to, running to the coffee shop and flipping open your employee laptop and logging on, you might not be aware of what the rule is. But at least if it's written, and that rests upon the employee to be diligent enough to read through it. That way, they don't come back to you as an employer and say, "Oh, I got this malicious virus on my computer because of this, this, and this," and you say, "Hey, well, where'd you get it?" "I was at the coffee shop." Well, it says here in your policy that you're not supposed to use it
that
here.
Yeah.
So, are there any other suggestions that you have for businesses in how they can lay out these policies in a way that the employees will actually recognize and abide by them?
Just from as a business owner, I think it's useful once a year to do a walkthrough of your handbook with the team. Just do if you have a weekly or monthly meeting, just sit down with the team and actually go through parts of the policy. You don't have to read it necessarily in depth, but you can skim it and point out highlights and say, please read this further, like, more in your own time. But I think it's important to do that, to go through it with the staff and say, again, here's the policy. Just a reminder, this, and this. Just a reminder, we do have an acceptable use policy. Here's things you can and can't do on the internet. Here's some highlights. Please read the rest on your own time. So I'd say putting forth a little bit of effort there with your team, buy some donuts, get some coffee, sit around the table and talk about it. I think that's really, really important. And again, like I want to go back to that first point that I made. It's not fair to hold people accountable to a set of rules that you haven't taken the time to explain to them. Okay. Or at least taken the time to create. So think about it. I know this stuff's hard and I know it's not fun to do and you're busy. But if you're working with like a managed service provider and you have a chief information officer, like a virtual chief information officer, or somebody who's coming over from that MSP that meets with you monthly, quarterly, whatever, bring this to their attention. This is the kind of thing they can help you with. In fact, like I said earlier, I alluded to it earlier, if they're a good MSP, or if they think they're a good MSP, they have these templates already made, right? We've made these templates in an effort to be a better MSP.
Awesome. Well, let's sum up this this lively, exciting conversation about policies by asking that final question. Making IT simple, breaking it down, 30 seconds or less. Travis, what are 5 of the most important policies that a business should implement?
Acceptable use policy to help you govern your internet usage, a password policy, a mobile device policy for phones, tablets, laptops, an email policy. What can you and can't you send an email? Data protection, retention, and destruction policy. How are we protecting data? How long are we keeping it? How long are we getting rid of it? There's your 5.